A great portrait is not about having the perfect studio, the perfect backdrop, or a truck full of lighting gear. Sometimes you have 5 minutes with somebody important. Sometimes the location is ugly, the light's terrible, and the person in front of the camera would rather be anywhere else. So how do you create a portrait that feels powerful, authentic, and memorable wherever you happen to be? Well, we'll find out right after this. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the members of our Camera Shake photography podcast community who support the show through Buy Me a Coffee. All you have to do is go over to buymeacoffee.com/camerashake and you can buy us a coffee because we like coffee. And if you'd like to help support future episodes, you'll find the link down in the description. Of course, you can also check out our Camera Shake merchandise store for t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and more. Links for everything are, as always, in the description. Anyway, today's guest is a photojournalist, portrait photographer, and educator who has spent more than 4 decades photographing presidents, politicians, celebrities, authors, artists, and scientists. His work has appeared in major publications around the world, and he's internationally known for his practical, creative approach to location lighting. Please welcome to the Camera Shake podcast none other than Mr. Rick Friedman. Hey, Rick, how's it going?
It is going terrific, and thank you for having me. This is a real treat.
Fantastic. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Let's start at the beginning, because you've done so many different things, and you've had your hands in so many different things, photographically speaking. Before photography became your career, what was the thing that first drew you to the camera, and what made photojournalism feel like the right place for you?
What kind of made photojournalism and what drew me to the camera was the fact that you could figure out ahead of time where news might happen, and you could get yourself there and be in the right place when it happened. I would see things go, well, I should go now. No, it's over. You have to figure out ahead of time. And that's really what drew me to it. And I fell in love with doing presidential politics very early in my career. The concept that I could be spending time with someone who thinks they're qualified to run the country. And that's me being polite. My first one was, I'll never forget my first political assignment. I was freelancing for United Press International, and the editor said to me, Rick, I want you to get down to the Park Plaza Hotel and photograph this gentleman, Jimmy Carter. He's running for president. To which I said, Jimmy who, and he's running for what? And then I thought about it for a second, and if this guy's really running for president, why are you sending me? But I went, and there was something about it, and then I started going to other events, and just getting to spend time with these people who think they're qualified to do it, And I mean, the last couple of campaigns, you have not had the kind of access that we had in other campaigns. Very early on in a campaign, there are people who think they should be president, and if they can get 6 little old ladies in a farmhouse to look up from their knitting, they'll go. And that's when, for me as a photojournalist, that was the time you go. Was not when they were just on press rises and there were buses and, Secret Service. You go early so you can interact with them and see how they really interact with people. And the more I did it, the more fascinating it became. And very shortly after I started, I joined a photo agency called Black Star. And I was just incredibly lucky to be in this group of photographers who they brought in. And, the Turnley brothers and Jim Nackway and Tony Swa, and somehow me. I'm not quite sure how I was in there, but I was. And my part was doing the politics. And their part, I think, was ducking bullets. And very shortly, I was working for Newsweek. So it kind of was a lot of, good dumb luck. But like anything in photography, people think you just show up with the camera and push the button. And as I put it, any idiot can push the button. Can you figure out all the other pieces of the picture? And you mentioned for the people you have 5 minutes to be with who would rather be anywhere else but you having to take their picture. And I can't tell you how many people have said to me, I hate having my photograph taken. Well, I go to those shoots and I research everybody and everything I can find on that person. My line is, if I can ask them one vaguely intelligent question, which, when you're dealing with a Nobel laureate, can be really difficult. Like some of them, I can't even understand their bios, let alone what they actually do. But it shows the subject that you care. I've had many a subject say, how do you know this? Did you read this book? And I would go, I tried.
Yeah.
I may not have made it through, but I did try to read the book. And it breaks the wall down. So all of a sudden you're not the enemy with the camera. And, if they don't want their picture taken, they should tell somebody ahead of time before you send. I mean, I will never go to take anybody's picture who in some way does not wants their picture taken, I'm not go to stakeouts or any of that. I have to be able to ring the doorbell and tell them who I'm working for.
It's an interesting thing because, that sort of interhuman connection, we talk about this a lot, on this podcast and in conjunction with portrait photography. But that interhuman connection is so important. It's really vital because it'll show in the picture. And I think that's, in your case, that's a really good example for why that's so important, even if, you've never met that person before.
Yeah, well, it's very important. I had a shoot a couple of weeks ago, which is part of this large project that I'm working on with Kyoto News Service. And the editor, this is great fun. I've been working on this for a while. One book has come out. There's another book in the works. And I love it, though. The editor sent me the book. Said, Rick, hope you enjoy the book. It's all in Japanese. I can't read a bit. But anyway, he sends me to, actually, first he tells me the gentleman is going to be in Boston for a few hours. And could I meet up with him? I do some research on the gentleman and find out he's in central Pennsylvania. And I happen to be teaching in Delaware the week before. So I call the gentleman up and I say, any chance I can come by your house? Because now I have him in his environment, not some generic environment in Boston, although I love my city. And the editor has informed me, Rick, this gentleman's politics are the exact opposite of yours. And he said, I assume you'll get along. We had the most fantastic time. It turns out he was a senior advisor on a presidential campaign that I covered for Time magazine. And in the end, we had such a great shoot that, and I did pictures of him and his wife and his dog, which I sent to him, as a gift to say thank you. And then we all went out to dinner. And if I hadn't taken the time to learn what Professor Gottfried did, then none of this would have happened. Yes, I could have pushed the button. I could have had a picture of him standing in front of his house. Instead, I've got all this relaxed stuff. And this gentleman he's 86 years old, was not relaxed in front of the camera, but absolutely delightful. And that, to me, the great joy of being a photojournalist are the folks we get to meet, the lives we get to drop in and out of. And, like I described, going to the universities that I've really gotten my college education 1 hour at a time from the greatest minds in the world. Because I get a Nobel laureate all to myself for a half hour. And when I go in and I've read their book or tried to read their book, then all of a sudden that 5 minutes becomes 10 minutes, becomes 20 minutes. And some of these folks, I've become friends with. So it's the best part of the job, and I describe it. If you want to make a lot of money, don't do what I do. If you want to have a really good time, do what I do. Yeah. We have a lot of fun not making a lot of money.
Yeah. You've worked across, news, politics, portraits, obviously corporate commissions and education things. What skills have carried across every part of that career? Are there like some core skills that are essential for all of these different areas of photography?
Well, the interpersonal skills are the ones that carry across. Can you get along with somebody? We will do these big corporate events where they'll fly a couple of us there. And like the last one, we only brought 380 pounds of equipment that we checked, plus what we brought on the aircraft. And, I'm going from one room to another and, looking for the moment. When does the person look right? And then at the same time, we've built a very elaborate studio, usually like in a lobby of a hotel, outside the ballroom, but it's full-blown, large studio setup. And as each person comes in to have their portrait done, you have to get them to relax. So you have to have the right attitude. And even if this is a case where you probably have not had a chance to research them, but the overall thing about the meeting. So now you start there and say, what is your role? What do you think about this that I just heard about in the last meeting? And all of a sudden they want to talk to you and they relax. And so getting the subject to relax and interacting with them so they forget about their time, they're having fun. I was saying, a good photo shoot is one where everybody's laughing when you leave. And on those sort of shoots, and even on any shoot I'm doing, when I make a picture that I like, I will go up to the subject and I'll show them the back of the camera and I'll say, what do you think of the photograph we are creating? Because I can't create the picture without them. I'm not creating the picture. We, as a team, subject and photographer, are creating this picture.
That's true.
They'll get inspired. And, can we do this? Can we do this? Well, was not part of the original idea, but sure. And then when we jump back to the corporate world, when we do these portrait sessions on location, we have it set up and using a photo, we're tethered into an iPad, and you get the picture, you show it to them and say, before the main part of the shoot starts, what do you like it? What else would you like to change? And quite often you'll get somebody go, I really hate this line right here. Okay, we'll soften that out right now. So by the time you actually make the picture, they know what they're going to get and they're happy about it. And when you're done with that part of the shoot, you've already corrected the picture.
That's the amazing thing about a photo.
You've corrected it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the incredible thing.
Yeah. You just hit download and that part of the gig's done.
Yeah.
The stuff I do, it's hours and hours because some of these will go and it'll be a 3 or 4 day event. And, at the dinner the last night, they want to do a quick retrospective of what happened during the week, which means I have to edit the whole job. And to have, 12, 14-hour days on these is not unusual.
Yeah.
But it pays well. And the people are lovely. And again, going back to the best part of the gig are the people you get to work with.
Now, you've mentioned earlier that it used to be easier to get access. So what has changed most in the way that photographers gain access to meaningful stories now?
Yeah, what I was thinking, and what I mentioned that is the way our last couple of U.S. presidential elections have gone.
Right.
It's used to start, well, it still sort of starts where Iowa, in the middle of the country, and New Hampshire up the road from me, were the very early places. That's where people, if you could do well in Iowa or New Hampshire, you might have a shot. But, when Trump came along, he wasn't doing anything quaint. He was doing it his way. And as much as he says, how horrible the media are, early on, when he really wanted the coverage, he would see, if the photographers were in the wrong place, as his security guys were about to hit you, because they weren't really bound by any actual rules. We were really happy when Secret Service came in, because you're dealing with professionals. These guys were, anyway, but Trump would actually see, sometimes he turned to his people, let him go by, because he knew the best picture was on the other side. But, Biden's last campaign, there was not much of the fun, quaint stuff. But prior to that, Bill Clinton's campaign was just unbelievable. You'd hit 5 states in a day.
Wow.
If you lost your schedule, you might not remember what your first event was. And the only event you ever got to on time was the first. He never left any room without talking to everybody and shaking everybody's hand. And no matter how many times the staff said, we have to go, sir, he was going to continue.
Yeah.
Like, I have a workshop coming up I've been to Little Rock, Arkansas since he was president. In 2 weeks, I have a workshop in Little Rock. So it'll be good to be back there.
Do you prepare differently when you're shooting somebody who's, because these sort of candidates, like, like Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, so on and so forth, they're already really used to having their picture taken. Do you prepare differently in any way when you're shooting, VIPs like that?
No, I mean, when I go out and cover news stories, for the most part, I have it pretty much thinned out to what gear I'm carrying. I mean, I carry 2 Nikon camera bodies, a Z7 II and a Z8. And all the lenses I shoot at Tamrons. So I have a Tamron 17-50 on one and a 50-400 on the other, and 1 Pro Photo speed light and extra battery and card in my pocket. And that's it. Maybe I just don't want to carry all the weight, but I don't think there's any need to carry all the weight. I still see people do it. I see young photographers who I swear they just want to show off all the gear they have. I want to carry as little as possible and do the job. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
As in terms of, how I prepare. I mean, the first trip, and it's actually, I can send you this picture. The first time I covered Bill Clinton, he was standing in front of a mill in New Hampshire and holding a little canvas bag, like you got from your grocery store with the name of the store. And he's kind of holding it like this. And there you go. And it says Bill Clinton for president. Because nobody had any idea who this guy was. And a handful of people showed up to photograph him. And I enjoy kind of going early. And we actually went way up north on that trip. And, ended up at the hotel bar. So in terms of the politicians, if, I'm political junkie, so I probably know something about them. But I might look at specific things, if they're, have an entourage, you may never really get to talk to them. It's early on that you get to talk to them. So the preparation for that really is, what is the little bit of gear I'm going to need? And then before I get in the car or go on the plane, there's always a backup for everything. I am because look, we all know nothing ever goes wrong in photography. Right. Never happens.
Never happens. So.
Well, my line is, and, I tell new assistants when they start working for me, plan for failure. Just think about what could go wrong. As a matter of fact, we call our studio the photographic test kitchen. And yes, we see clients there, but the studio is literally 1 floor below where I'm sitting now. We get down there before a shoot and we'll practice with gear. What do we think we're going to use? Let's set it up, and make sure we have an extra of everything. I mean, I may not bring 2 exact sets of lenses, but I'll have enough backup. So if something goes down, which, knock on wood, it hasn't, which is amazing because I'm not gentle with my gear. When I'm done with a camera, it's done. It's like good maybe to put under the wheel of your car to keep it from rolling down a hill, but it's not good for anything else. They're dead.
What do you look for? Like, when you're shooting a president, for example, or a political public figure like that, what is it that you look for? So beyond the the obvious kind of handshake or like podium shot, or what is it that helps an image say something more human, so to say?
Yeah, because if you go to like a Trump event, they are going to tell you where to stand.
Right.
And if you're part of the travel pool, you're going to be one of those, 3 or 4 photographers up front. Everybody else is going to be in the back on a riser. And, they tend to, the risers are set up that the TV guys are in front of, the still guys are in back. And I don't know, everybody crowds to the middle. And it's sort of like, I don't want to stand next to 4 very talented wire service photographers. I mean, they're a wire photographer, their work's going to be distributed everywhere, including to my editor. So I will tend to do things like, I'll go hang out like what looks like a bad position by the stairs. And for some things it is, but I never get a microphone in the middle of his face. And now, of course, you have to worry about the glare off of the bulletproof glass. But there are times when everybody is looking at Trump or whatever's going on and nobody's paying attention to me. And I may just run down those stairs for 3 or 4 frames in the crowd and run right back up before they can yell at me.
Yeah.
And try to make something a little different.
You know what I wonder?
Very hard.
You know what I wonder these days? I wonder whether, with all the social media and cameras and iPhones and all that kind of stuff, the fact that people can record video, and I wonder whether people like Donald Trump might actually be a good example. Are people in general more photo savvy or more savvy in terms of having a picture taken now compared to let's say in the in the 90s, before in the 90s, let's say before stuff.
Trump was always photo savvy.
Yeah.
And he, when he's doing things, he knows how it's gonna look. One of the pictures I have that was an event like this with him where it was funny because they had just brought some of the people from the riser down front, and I thought, I'm just gonna stay here. Then everybody else is going there, I'll stay here. And he starts with one of his, look at those horrible lying members of the media, and everybody in the audience turns around and starts pointing at me, screaming at the press riser. Made a terrific photograph. Shot it wide, and they're up, angrily pointing at the press riser. All the other stills were down front. Occasionally you win. Not often, but occasionally you win. And I ran, double truck in Time magazine.
Do you know in advance what kind of images you're going to shoot? A lot of time, or is it really just something like you make the best out of the situation that you're in a particular venue? Or how much prior knowledge do you have?
Well, it's if you're doing the current president, and for that matter, Biden, you pretty much know where you're going to be. You're now asking how long a throw is it? Is this a 400 or 600? Is this a 600 with a doubler?
Right.
How much stuff do I have to schlep?
Yeah.
And what's nice is that, some of the newer lenses are very good lenses, aren't that heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I have a 150-6 that's terrific. So I'll take that, and, my wide angle and call it a day.
That being said, I just bought a Nikon 85 1.2, and that thing, you can anchor a boat down with that. I mean,
that is one big hunk of glass. It is a beautiful piece of glass. It is an absolutely spectacular lens. It's funny, I don't see me using it. I probably have 3 fast 85 millimeter lenses, and I literally can't remember the last time I used them. No, I have a Zeiss Batis,
right,
85 1.8. It's just a beautiful piece of glass. And now that I've said that, maybe I'll go dig it out and shoot with it.
Yeah,
for kind of every day. The other lens that I use a lot, if I'm doing portraiture, if I'm photographing models, Tamron makes a 35 to 150, 2 to 2.8.
Nice, yeah.
It is very sharp. It's a sweet piece of glass. A bit on the heavy side.
Yeah.
And for news stuff, it just doesn't go wide enough or long enough.
Yeah.
For the longest time, the longest thing I would carry would be a 70 to 200. Until I got the lens that's the predecessor to the one I have now. The original was 100 to 400. And it's like, boy, you're thinking it's not really a 400 millimeter picture, but every so often you want to pull it in tight.
Yeah.
Which, now I always carry something that goes to 400. So, and it's very interesting because all of the major camera brands now have lenses within this range.
Yes.
When Tamron came out with it, they were the only one who had a 100 400. Now they all have.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing many people with 70 to 200 2.8s. First of all, they're heavy. Although the new Nikon one is lighter because
Yeah, the new Nikon.
it's got one.
I tell you what, the new Nikons are actually, they're fantastic. The 24 to 70 2.8, the S2 version, like the very latest one, is so light. You know, it's a robust lens with beautiful glass, but really in comparison to, I used to have a 24-70 2.8 Nikon lens that's probably about, I would say, 20 years old or something.
I think I still have that in my safe.
Yeah, yeah. And that was heavy. I mean, that's like you could roll like a tank over that thing, But it was a heavy thing to carry around with you. But the new one is like almost worth nothing.
I feel like the 24 to 120.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
That was a nice range.
Although I have to say, with that lens, I had one and I sold it. And the reason I sold it had nothing to do with the image quality or the focal length was actually really good. The thing was, when I was carrying that camera, the barrel would extend, due to gravity, and it used to drive me nuts. So,
well, that and those lenses that extend like that, if it's extended and you're walking through a door in a crowd, the end of that lens and that door frame may become good friends, and the door frame's not going to care. Yeah, the other lens will. One of the nice things, actually, again with the Tamron lenses, they have a lock.
Yeah. And that's what that was absolutely missing anymore. Definitely, that was totally missing on that lens. Otherwise, a really beautiful lens. Nothing wrong with that lens, But and I used to actually take it on vacation as well because I always thought that's a great focal length for vacation. It's like one lens, and you can actually shoot a lot of different stuff. But just walking around with that thing was just, it's just annoying.
Do you find yourself going through phases of, what are the lenses of the moment?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I had. So I've always liked an 85 just for portraiture, and all of this has to do with like where I shoot. So in my little home studio, there isn't that much lateral space. So at 70 to 200, if I wanted to get like a blurry background kind of portrait at like 120, 160, 200 or something like that, I just can't get far enough away from the subject in my house, basically. So I've sort of by default gravitated towards the 85 because I can be closer to the subject, and it's just become almost like my trademark focal length, And I always used to say, like, what's the point in like spending a lot of money on a 1.4 back in the day, before they brought out 1.2. So I used to shoot with a plastic fantastic 1.8 all day long. Great, great image quality, sharp lens. Didn't break the bank, and that was until I saw the relatively new 1.2, Z lens, basically. And that, I tell you, I did a portrait session yesterday where I shot that at 1.2 with an ND filter. The smoothness it's beautiful. It's like butter, So it's like, I mean, that would never work.
Convinced me I need to go try some different things.
Yeah, it's really it's just it's worth the wait. Let's put it. I mean, it's a heavy lens, and it's not one that you can easily take around. It's definitely not like a. I don't want to try 85 in a street photography settings with that lens. It's just not.
I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, you don't want to do. I did last weekend. We had the Gay Pride Parade.
Oh yeah,
which I covered for one of the papers, and all of the politicians were, at least all the Massachusetts politicians were there. And so, you're doing a bit of, running to keep up with them. I ran a few times to keep up with the governor, and I went, I got a picture of her, I'm done. But I walked about 4.5 miles that day.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to carry an 85 one. I carried those two lenses and that, the Pro Photo Speed light, just a little, when I've got the real ghastly light to fill it in.
Yeah.
That's it. And let me tell you, the end of about 4.5 miles, I was beat.
Yeah. People often forget that when you shoot, events, for example. I remember I've shot the Albert Hall in London several times, and the thing about that place is there's stairs. It's stairs, 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 and stairways galore. I mean, you're running up and down, uh, all day long, and it's if you're carrying a bag with you or several, a couple of camera bodies with. And you need a long lens. I mean, if you're up in a gallery there, if you want to see anything on stage, unless you want to do only wide shots, but if you want to capture any action on the stage from up there, which is a great angle and everything, you're going to have to take really long lenses, But man, you're feeling it. I think the first time I shot the Albert Hall years ago, I woke up the next morning and I kid you not, I couldn't feel my legs. That's like,
Yeah. Yep. That's, I have to admit, I can't do it every single day at the pace I used to do it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, again, it's a matter of cutting down how much gear. And, I'm not schlepping camera bags. I mean, I never take a camera bag to a news event.
This episode is brought to you by Platypod. You know these moments when you really need a tripod, but taking one with you just feels like too much effort? Too big, too heavy, too awkward to carry around? Well, that's exactly why I love Platypod. I use it in my own work because it gives me a really solid, stable platform for my camera in places where a regular tripod simply is not practical. There's the rugged extreme for larger camera setups, the incredibly versatile Delta, the compact traveler for when space is tight, and the handle which lets you position your camera in all sorts of creative places. And for portrait photographers, Bracket & Bounce is a brilliant portable lighting solution. It helps create flattering directional light without dragging softboxes around or depending on whatever ceiling happens to be above you. For landscapes, macro, video, wildlife, portraits, or travel photography, Platypod helps you get shots that would otherwise be difficult or even impossible. Head over to platypod.com to take a look. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. How do you direct people who are not comfortable in front of a camera, without making them feel sort of overly, posed or managed or something like that?
Yeah, again, you go in and, can you talk to them about something? Go in with the enthusiasm, this, I understand a little bit about why this magazine is doing this article. And I tried to learn, can you help me? And now all of a sudden it's their thing. So it's not about the picture right now. It's about what they're good at.
Yeah.
And then I kind of say, well, what do you think of this shot? If it has to be a major production, well, then there are enough people there to make it a major production. But, when I'll have it set up and I'll show it to them. I mean, I don't want them standing around watching me light. They're welcome to if they want to learn how to do it. But, that's wasting their time. So knowledge of what they do, appreciate their time. I tell people, when you walk into a room or when you arrive, what kind of cars are in the parking lot? If there's a really expensive sports car parked next to the door, well, now you know what you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about that sports car.
Yeah.
If there's a picture of a boat and if there are pictures of their grandkids, talk about their grandkids. You always win on that one.
Yeah.
And there are some people, and I'll tell you a funny story. This was, if you're scientists are one group to deal with politicians. And many years ago, I was doing some work for a publication called American Banker. And American actually recommended this editor for a job. And, there are pictures of guys in banks, not exactly fun. And I remember her saying to me, Rick, I want you to go have fun with these people. And without thinking, I said, they're bankers. If they were fun, they'd do something else. She never hired me again.
Is it like,
again, you try to relate to them. Obviously, I'm not going to do a banker and make fun of, him or her, but it's so easy to research anybody today.
Yeah.
So there's something there you can talk about. And, you have to go in with the right attitude. If you go in with, I really don't want to photograph this banker, well, you've already killed your shoot before you ever started.
Yeah.
If you go in and go, "Man, that lobby is spectacular, I love that desk," or the right attitude, the right enthusiasm. No.
Yeah.
Then that becomes part of the shoot. And there are simple little things like go dressed appropriately. That's all. I mean, I tell, the folks who are nice enough to work for me, you don't have to be dressed in nice black clothes to come hang out in the office in the studio. We're just testing things. I said, but you have to have nice black clothes here because I get assignments where they call, and they don't even say, "Are you free?" They say, "Go now." And I mean, we are projecting an image as photographers. So I don't wear ties, but I do wear black suits.
Right.
Or black pants and a sports jacket. And everything has to look appropriate. Because if you come in and you're disheveled and you're messing with your equipment and, damn, why isn't this lens going? Oh, you're already setting a bad precedent.
Yeah.
If you go in and you really look the part, and, I have to admit, I'm not above, photographing a scientist and find, in my research, find out that, another scientist that they have studied with or their work is similar. I will say, so, I photographed so-and-so and he or she was explaining their work, but I can't quite understand how it gets to your work.
Right.
And now they want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And that breaks down the wall. The most important thing is breaking down that wall. Simple little things like my cameras, the transmitters on my cameras, I can control the power of my lights from the top of my camera. Not that it's that much effort to walk to the light and turn the dial, but the most important thing is the relationship, as I said, between the subject and you as the shooter. And if you break that relationship, you're talking about something and, that light over there needs to get down to stop. Well, if I don't have to go to it, I don't break the relationship.
Right.
And then we try to do everything to make sure everything goes smooth. I mean, I have, I will have an extra transmitter in my pocket just on the outside chance that it fails. There was the old saying, every job you go to with one PC code will guarantee it will fail. And every job you go to with 3 PC codes will guarantee they're all good.
Yeah. That's how it works.
So on the big shoots, where I have a team, there is an extra strobe. And of course, they take no effort to set up now. Back in the days when we were shooting, power packs and heads, then we literally had extra sets up. And if something goes wrong, which, knock on wood, it rarely does, because we do try to break it in the studio as opposed to on location. Our line is, would you please adjust the third light down? At that point, I will we'll usually go to the subject and find a good frame and say, well, what do you think of this? So now I've distracted him by the fact that my assistant is fixing something.
Yeah.
And fix time should never be more than 30, 40 seconds because the extra light's ready to go. So you take one out, you put it back in. And off you go in the shoot, and it's all grand, and they had no idea anything went wrong. And then we get in the car and look at each other and go, what the hell went wrong?
Yeah, that's always the thing.
Shoot. They never know. I mean, we do some work with one of the big worldwide financial institutions, and we will photograph the CEO usually twice a year. And we will go in and pre-light 5 different locations, all lit. And all we do, and the first time we did this, we're walking out of the first room, and a gentleman said to me, "You're going to bring the lights?" And I jokingly said, "We don't need those." We walk into the next room. I push the transmitter. The room lights up. And he never had to wait while we moved to light because it was all pre-lit. And then we got done this on the very first shoot. And they had hired me because I had done a shoot with him for one of the financial magazines. So that was the introduction. I mean, I didn't go knocking on their door. They're very nice. They asked for us. We got done and we had him for an hour. And I looked at him, and by this point, I'm calling him by his first name. So we're done. Thanks for your time. Looks at his watch and goes, I have 15 minutes free. I never have 15 minutes. I have 15 minutes for nothing. And he walked out smiling, happy as could be. And VP of Communication said, if he's happy, everybody's happy. Yeah. That's the inverse is true also, And he just liked the way, we do it. I bring the same. I have somebody I've been working with literally for 22 years. When she was in undergraduate school, she was taking like her first photojournalism class, and some big protest on Boston Common, which is kind of almost daily. There's some protests there. And I was shooting it for a magazine, and they brought the whole class down, and Keiko Hiromi is her name. And Keiko informed me that when she graduated, she was going to come work for me. I said, great, here's my card, call me. I got to do what I do because some gentleman took me in when I didn't know anything and taught me the trade. And I believe you always pass that forward. If the people are willing to put the time in. I mean, because I literally knew nothing. When I started hanging out in UPI, I wasn't even qualified. I could soup film. I was qualified to soup film and get coffee. Right. And I wasn't that good at either. So 3 years later, Keiko calls me up and says, I graduated and I did a 1.5-year photography program, and now I'm going to come work for you. And I said, great, come on over. Came over, perfectly dressed. I have people show up for interviews in torn blue jeans. Yeah. If you show up for an interview in torn, but you're not getting in. I mean, I don't care how you're dressed with your friends. That's fine. This is a job. And so she hung around for must have been 2 hours. And I was telling her how I like my camera bags. I already knew I was hiring her. What she didn't know is that my previous full-time assistant had given notice that morning that she'd gotten a job on a newspaper. Was giving me her 2 weeks, And Keiko's sitting here and she says, do I get a second interview? To which I say, do you think I would have talked to you for 2 hours if you didn't get if you didn't already have the job? And then the phone rings and it was the New York Times. I said, remember everything I just taught you? Pick up the gear, let's go. Trial by fire. Yeah. And we've been a team ever since. Cool. She's a brilliant photographer. But, it's, if you can play it forward, the gentleman who taught me, George Riley at UPI, when he was a young man, he wanted to be a news photographer. And back then, UPI was actually called Acme News Pictures. Right. Kind of like Roadrunner. Yeah. Somebody taught Georgie the business. And he just never took any kid in. And a number of those folks have, gone on to have Time Magazine contracts, or one was editor for the Americas for Reuters. I mean, some of the folks have gone on to, I've had quite a good career. But boy, I was not qualified to do it. But the more I saw it, the more I wanted to do it. Yeah. It was so, and I did start out, with a car full of police radios. I mean, I did my share of crime scenes and fires, and it'd have to be a hell of a fire before I'm not going to drive around it now.
So, when you walk into like an unfamiliar location for the first time, what's your first sort of visual and technical assessment? Like, what is it that you look for first of all?
Well, the first thing is, you just said it. Look, what is there? I mean, I photograph a lot of scientists. These world-renowned scientists tend to work in little white rooms with, if they have cool microscopes, then the microscope looks like a refrigerator. Or they have a microscope that looks like the one that you had, in middle school. Except they're going to win a Nobel Prize they already have. So you walk into this, and how do you create that and make it really interesting. There's the challenge, where some editors want the scientist in the lab pipetting. If their name is on the door, they're not pipetting. They have grad students for that.
Yes.
But how do you convince them to do it? And, I'm looking at your set. I mean, I too like playing with lights and colors and gels and projections. I love doing projections. So, sometimes I'll say to one of the scientists, can you pick a couple of your images of your research that's colorful? And then we'll look at it together and we'll decide. I said, I want to project it on the wall behind you, so you're not in front of a white wall. And then I may add colors and, you're dealing with microscopes. I take these tiny little 25 watt second slave units. They're cheap. They're like $30, $40. When I find them, I buy a few of them at a time because they don't last very long. But I have one picture where, you can see the gentleman, his microscope and the projection of the science on the wall. And then you can see his computers. And I have no idea why I gelled the microscope yellow, but I did. And then I took another one and put a green gel on this little slave and just laid it on the far side of the table on the microscope. And the backlight around the lenses, which had a slight green hue to it, gives the lens a much more three-dimensional feel. So I'm looking at what is there wherever I am, whether it's go to a portrait outside. Well, what is there when I get there? What is the right thing? How do I see it? And constantly looking for ideas, suggestions. I mean, do I need to light it? Do I want to light it? And I love the elaborate lighting setups.
Yeah. What are the most common mistakes that people make when they're trying to light a portrait on location?
The first mistake, real mistake, being late. Show up early.
Yeah.
I can show you a couple of my favorite pictures that I've made. Were because I was there early and I was ready to go. I mean, I have one of Goldie Hawn, and I was supposed to photograph her in a bookstore after she'd put out a book. And I get there half hour early, and I'm not opening cases. I'm ready to go. And I'm standing there, and she walks out of the back room and sees an old friend and reacts to seeing her old friend. I had my picture. I knew I had my picture. I wasn't going to give up my half hour with Goldie Hawn, but I knew I had my picture. I have one picture that's somewhat known. It's called Three Guys on a Couch. And it's three gentlemen sitting on a couch, kind of holding hands, kind of crossed. And it's Keith Richards, Chuck Berry, and Leonard Cohen.
Wow. Okay.
And I wouldn't have gotten that picture had I not shown up really early. And first of all, you couldn't get above the ground floor. I mean, security had to bring you up. And I was the only one allowed in with a camera. And I show up really early and I walk into there and there's Chuck Berry sitting on a couch by himself. And I'm trying to think of, hi, Chuck. Hi, Mr. Berry. I went with, hi, I'm Rick. I'll be your photographer. And by the time anybody else showed up, we were having a grand old time. Telling stories and, he was posing and then he wanted to play with my cameras. And what am I going to say to Chuck Berry? No. And so, but by the time everybody else came in, I was supposed to be there. So I wasn't just the photojournalist there. I was a guy who was a friend of Chuck's. And amongst the people who were there, Peter Wolf was there. And Peter used to be my neighbor. He called me up the next morning and said, Rick, wasn't that amazing? I said, you know these people. How do you think I felt, I mean, I look over and go, that guy over there looks just like Salman Rushdie. Oh, it is Salman Rushdie. I mean, it's just surreal. Paul Simon used to be the most important guy in a room. He wasn't in this room.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Made amazing pictures. And actually, Peter Wolf's book, one of my pictures is in his book from that shoot.
How do you decide whether you're going to work mainly with available light or whether you can add flash or light the whole scene out? What's the sort of decision making process in that?
What is there when I get there? So, I mean, if it is a science shoot and I'm going to be in a lab, then I'm going to bring tons of lights. Now, the beauty of today's lights is tons of lights are a lot smaller than they used to be. I mean, I'm using a lot of strobe heads that are the size of a can of beer.
Yeah.
You know, they're just tiny and they have a magnetic front. You take your softbox out of its case and you go click and it's open. Because I don't know about you, but I do not miss fighting with those rods to get him into the rings.
No. The Profoto
Almost
A2s
all
are
of them
fantastic.
in, one fell out. You know,
Yeah. Those Profoto A2s are fantastic.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, in terms of going out doing street shooting, and I'm just looking out the window, the sun's out. It's pretty much the longest day of the year. If I had to go photograph somebody right now, I would at least have a speed light with me.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm doing portraits, obviously I may have a reflector or two, depending on how elaborate. I mean, I will have scrims in my car, whether or not we're going to set them up. And if you get there and you got to have the ocean in the background and the light's not right, which it's not going to be. I worked on a number of movies and, you know, they seem to like to shoot the first set of advertising pictures to announce this movie's being made. You know, it had to have all the major actors and it had to be done whenever the lead actress wanted it done. It was always about the lead actress. And inevitably they do it right after lunch and, you know, you were on the beach, you had to have the ocean in the background and the light is just ghastly. And it's the only time at a movie set I light. Yeah. Can't bring my strobes out on a movie set. But boy, you know, when I start a film, I go make friends with all the grips. Like, people say, you know, we're going to go out for a beer. Rick, you want to come? I'll buy the first round. That's money well invested. Because when I need a 40 by 40 up 25 feet, these guys will do it for me. Yeah. You know, I don't carry anything bigger than an 8-foot scrim. And a lot of sandbags. You know.
What's the smallest kind of kit you would comfortably take on a shoot like that?
Well, a shoot like that really presents the problem because you've got so many people and you've got bright light. You know, you would never choose to shoot the picture at this time of day. Oh yeah, let me shoot the picture. You know, at blue hour with some clouds, and I'll make you a cool picture. Anyway, but what I quickly learned working on movies is the least important person on a movie set is the still guy. You know, so you take what you can get and you do your job. But, you know, in terms of what will I bring on a kit for an assignment. So I have a 5-day shoot, which we got extended to 7 days, down in DC. And I'm going to get down and I'm going to shoot portraits. That's my job. And I will bring with me 2 Profoto A2s, which are the lights that are the size of a can of beer, and 2 A10s, which are their speed lights. Then they're interchangeable. All the adapters are all interchangeable. Batteries are the same. And I will take that and put those 4 lights in a think tank 4-wheel rolling suitcase. I mean, I have tons of think tank rolling cases. The 4-wheel one was just like unbelievable. It is just incredible. Because I always seem to have to leave at the furthest gate and arrive at the furthest gate. Anyway, so I will be able to take those 4 lights. I will take another camera. Actually, I'll take 2 more cameras in there. 2 lenses, sometimes 3, and all the little batteries. And I wheel all that on the plane. Yeah. So that I've got a 4-light kit. Yeah. And the only thing I check is a light stand bag, and because the lights weigh nothing, I use carbon fiber light stands. Yeah. So my light head weighs 1.5 pounds, and my light stand weighs under 1.5 pounds. And then, you know, obviously you have to bring a couple of small light click modifiers, but you're not carrying a ton of weight. No. So, I mean, on this gig, obviously, because I'm going for a week, I need to, bring clothes and things. But there are times that I'll just fly down to DC to do 1 portrait. And I just get up in the morning, drive to the airport here in Boston, catch the 9:30 plane down to Washington, land at 11, go have lunch, go to the guy's office or wherever he or she is, do my pictures for an hour, get a cab back to the airport and fly home, be home in time for dinner. Yeah. So in that case, I just take this, rollerboard suitcase, and I have a backpack that has my laptop in it. And again, I'm checking 1 little bag. That's it. and I don't have a ton of weight.
Yeah.
So it ranges from that to, I said a while ago, the corporate shoot was 380 pounds.
Right. Yeah.
And in the U.S., if you Delta, United, and American have what's called press baggage.
Oh,
It's a beautiful thing. And what you need is a valid press card. I'm pretty sure the SkyCap at the Phoenix airport does not know what a valid Massachusetts press card looks like. Because if I made a fake press card, it would look more real than the one I have that is real. And that is up to 25 pounds, up to 100 pounds per bag, $50 a bag each way.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good deal.
That's pretty good.
And when my big case, when I do these big corporate shoots, I have a big, it's called a location manager 50. And it's a think tank case. It's about 5 feet high. And we fill that up with backdrops and, because we're doing these elaborate shoots, you kind of need a cart to work off of. So I'm bringing my own cart in that case, plus my big stands and, guys at the airport hate me because of what that thing weighs.
Yeah.
I love when they put a tag on it that says heavy. No kidding. Try picking it up.
Now, you're known for like practical location lighting education. What is the simplest lighting principle that transforms an image? For photographers who feel maybe intimidated by flash, because this is the thing I hear all the time. People go like, "Oh, I only shoot available light," and I always think,
I'm an available light photographer. That means you don't know how to light.
Exactly right. So,
or you're afraid of it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's usually more often the case than not. Is that people are just intimidated by having to or not knowing how to control flash. But
yeah,
what is the simplest sort of lighting principle that people can get used to, maybe as a step into flash lighting?
Okay. So going way, way back, when I first thought I wanted to teach, I have a number of friends who are phenomenal photographers, and I went to several of their classes to learn how to do it. And what I learned was how I didn't want to do it.
Right.
I remember going to class of a very famous photographer. And it was this photographer had 5 assistants, must have been 15 light stands. And this is like, I don't even own this much crap. Fine photographic gear. And, I brought it down to a practical point. And when I teach practical lighting, and it starts as very simple lighting. You could take one speed light and put it on camera, and if you know what to do with it, you can make nice light. You don't have as much freedom, but, go buy a $5 piece of foam core, a reflector, and hold it out and do this, and bounce the light off of that. Now your light source is over here. And then the next step, obviously, is one light, get it off the camera and use a reflector and keep it really simple so it's not intimidating. My saying is it has to be so simple a photographer can do it.
Yeah.
So, and from that you build. So when I teach my workshops, I'll start the workshop, go around the room, and I will ask everybody to introduce themselves. Please tell us what you do and what you would like to learn in this course. Now I have my starting point. If everybody owns a studio, then I'm not doing lighting 101. If they don't know the difference between an f-stop and a bus stop, well, then I need to start at a different point.
Yeah.
And I usually have somebody teach with me. So if the classes are split, then I want everybody to get a lot out of it. But I don't want to hold back the people who are really talented. And, I have people tell me they come in my workshop, and if they learn one trick, it was worth coming.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, exactly.
And so, but the people who are starting out, we can make it simple. Doesn't have to be elaborate. You don't have to go out and buy expensive strobes. If you're just going to be shooting inside, buy an inexpensive LED.
Yeah.
And start at that point. Remember when I do, when I'm doing presentations, where there'll be people who want to shoot while I'm showing strobes. I leave the model lights on so they can shoot, so they can just see what is involved in it. But initially, if it's too much stuff, it's frightening.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what this stuff does, and it's frightening.
Yeah.
So it's really doesn't have to be expensive. I tell them, go find a friend or relative and torture them.
Yeah, or your children.
Yeah, right, exactly. If I do, I photograph my cat. But get a crash test dummy or something. And just practice, because there's nothing worse than somebody who goes out on a shoot and you watch them and they're fumbling with their camera, and now you're losing your subject. If they ever had your subject, the subject now. And now it's frustrating to you as the shooter. Like, why isn't this working? It worked when I took it out of the box yesterday. Why isn't this working? And again, now you're not paying attention to the most important thing, the relationship between the subject and the photographer.
Yes.
So, and I watch people do this. You should not be deciding which shutter speed you should be on at the moment. And something I see people who are starting out with, they set their camera for a strobe and then they look at their in-camera meter and then realize that, now wait, it's not a proper exposure.
Yeah.
And they forget that it's two separate exposures. And then, when I teach more, I do a tremendous amount of mixing strobe and available light. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
I'll project something on a wall, and whether I have a fairly decent projector that I hook up to a laptop, or, I'm using a ProPhoto small spot, or I just got, this is the coolest little thing. It's the whole thing, I think, is like $130, $140. They're towing cars outside, street sweeping. That's what that is. If it's a problem, I'll shut the window. So, but anyway, it looks like a really cool LED flashlight. It's 20 watts. And then there's an adapter, and you can create shapes like you can, like with the ProPhoto small spot. And you drop 2-inch cookies in it, and you're going to get pretty much what you're getting out of an expensive one of these, but it's continuous light. It's not strobe.
Yeah.
But it's $130, not $1,800.
Well, that's exactly it.
Yeah. I mean, and there are less expensive ones. Westcott makes a less expensive version of it that's pretty good.
Oh, Godox make one, which also less expensive. It is fantastic, actually.
Yeah, is it? I'll have to look at that one. I haven't really looked at it.
Yeah, they make two versions.
I thought this thing was cool. I've literally had it for a week.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I swear, I go to a camera store, I'm teaching, I swear I'm not buying anything. That has never happened.
Yeah, that never happens.
I was restrained this time. I didn't buy too much stuff,
Yeah.
And it's like, I really don't need any more gear.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you don't want to try something different.
I think
I want to look at. Yeah. Well, and if I look at a photograph that I'm doing and I go, this looks like something I did 3 years ago. Well, then it's time to do something else.
Yeah.
Time to think of something else,
Yes.
I mean, if you're doing a straight headshot, well, yes, there's roughly a formula for a headshot. But, the creative pictures. Well, there's nothing wrong with shooting lots of headshots. I know people who are making a very good living shooting headshots. I wouldn't want to just shoot headshots. I don't want to just do anything.
Yeah.
My line, which I stole from Rick Salmon, is I specialize in not specializing.
Yeah. I think it's important to build in some time for personal projects as well, because it teaches you so much. Even if you're trying something and you fail at first, because that's part of the learning experience. Knowing how not to do something. What I tend to do, aside from creating personal projects and just working on that, I try to build in a little extra time at the end of a shoot, especially when I have a model around, for example. If I have half an hour at the end or something like that, I'll just try something different. if I know we've got what we need to get, we've got that in the bag, we've got a little half hour, 40 minutes or something left, I like to try something. And very often, I come out with something that's different and it's new, and it's something that I can use and make part of, of my style and what I do. And it's practical because I don't have to necessarily pay the model anymore because I've already hired them for X amount of hours. So it's
I mean, I was teaching last weekend at a place called Cardinal Camera, which is conveniently located about a 7.5-hour car ride from here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And, we finished the class and, I photographed the model a little bit during the class so they can see how I do it. But then I want everybody to shoot. We play what I call pass the transmitter. But, I said to the model, you have a few minutes afterwards so you and I can really work.
Yeah.
And I came out of it with a couple of pictures I just love out of it. There's a picture, I posted it recently on social media, and she's wrapped in the red dress. That red dress is downstairs in my studio. The red dress has two 10-foot trains.
Right.
And someday there's going to be a book called Red Dress, because I photographed about 40 different models in the same dress. And it's, some on a beach. Anyway, this time she took the train and wrapped it around her head like it was a scarf. And there were a couple of big stuffed bears in the camera store. So she's got the bears wrapped up in the train, and it was we had a great time. Yeah. It was her creating, the two of us creating together, and just, the woman had a long ride home, not as long as mine. Yeah. But, she's like, yeah, I'll stay as long as you want to work.
Yeah.
Because she wants to do her craft and I want to do mine. And you've got someone you're working with. And I know, I already told her, I will work with her again. And I've got one job coming up that I will hire her again for. When I have good models, a good model makes us look good.
Exactly. And I think, that's a really important aspect, actually. I work with, sometimes you work with somebody where you go, actually, there's like a creative connection because, you're trying to achieve something. They're really into the idea, and so you kind of, it's like teamwork. I always say two brains are cleverer than just one brain, and it's this. I love that situation where you work with someone, you can bounce off of them, because you have an idea and then they bring something else to the party, and the end result is so much, infinitely better than what you thought it was going to be from the start because they managed to put themselves into it creatively. And I love that. That's a great thing about creativity just in general.
Yeah, I know. I have a handful of models that I love working with. And some of them live like at the other end of the country. And when I'm out there, I will always hire them. Yeah. And then usually after the job's over, then we'll go out and shoot for another day just because we enjoy shooting together.
Yeah.
And, I like it, with models. Several models I started working with when they were quite young. And they're going on and they have real careers. One lady I tried to hire because I thought she was in New York, and she said, I actually moved to Miami to work down here. And I had a job in Miami shortly after that. And I call her up and I'd say, great, I'm coming to Miami. Can I, hopefully I can afford you now. She said, I got to do Paris Fashion Week that week. And it's like, you blew me off for Paris Fashion Week? Good for you. That's
yeah.
That's great.
You've managed to so successfully diversify, across editorial work, workshops, education. So, was that deliberate from the beginning, or did you grow that sort of organically?
Well, go far enough back. I didn't know enough to teach a workshop. And it's funny. One of the things I do at every real workshop, we do what we call silly group photograph. And the original idea of silly group photograph was to prove that I have a student. And the idea is to make each one better than the other. And it's actually part of the curriculum, although they don't actually know that. Because I tell them, this is an idea. We have to think this up together. It has to be something really good. And you don't want the people in Washington to have a better picture than you do. And now we're going to light it. Okay. Now you've got the last one we did was 64 people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, and a horse. 64 people, a horse, and a hawk.
Yeah.
No. And, everybody is part of it. And how do you deal with this lighting? How do you deal with this directing? The picture is actually, this one, the camera was on a 9-foot tripod. And then we ran a cable down so we could plug it into the laptop. And I'm actually taking the photograph. So I'm holding a pocket wizard that's connected, that's firing the camera. The cable comes out of the pocket wizard, goes into the camera, fires the shutter, closes the circuit, passes through the pocket wizard, and fires the pro photo transmitter. So, and it's, the point I make out is this is a really elaborate picture.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of doing, I started the workshops and I realized, magazines were hiring me because of my lighting. So maybe I'll see if I can teach a couple, literally like that. And I hook up with some folks that like what I do. And, as time has gone on, the workshops are bigger. But there's sort of a maximum size. The one that had 64 people, Karen Summers, who is my partner in life and in photography, who's a terrific photographer, was there to teach. Rick Farrow was there. Vanelli was there. And then Bart Feldman, who owns T&F Camera and Studio in the Woods. So there were a lot of people there to teach with that many students. Because I hate it when I'm teaching and there's a line of people waiting to take a picture.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh.
And I tell people, 3 or 4 frames. And, there are certain people, it's like, remember what comes after 2? This is not your private photo shoot.
Yeah.
This last one totally fooled me. Because these people only did 3 frames. Like, you're done already?
Yeah.
So, which was good, because then we added more to it. So it's constantly evolving, but again, it's evolving depending on what they know. Yeah. So there's, another example, when we started this, we did recently what's called the Mars School, the Mid-Atlantic Regional School in Delaware. And it's a 5-day school. And I literally had a third of the ballroom of the hotel was to be my space. And when I started it, we wheeled all the gear in there. There was not a light stand set up. And then we built the lighting and the workshop. By the end of the week, it was mind-boggling how much gear there was.
Yeah.
So I can send us that very funny short time lapse of us unloading my Jeep.
Yeah.
And it's because the way that was packed for that trip, I describe it, you could put in another sheet of gel, but you'd have to take one out.
Yeah.
It was seriously max volume.
Yeah, Tetris.
Yeah, it was. It's just ridiculous, Yes. And I would own like a bigger car. I have a big Jeep, but I would own, a Suburban or something, but I live in the middle of the inner city. You can't get anything bigger than my car in my parking space.
Yeah, that's the thing.
That's as big as go. And I'm not moving.
Yeah. But Rick, for photographers listening who want to make work that lasts, what is the one habit or maybe mindset you would urge them to develop?
Oof. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Organize your archives. Because when you're starting out, you may not have that much, but if you've been at it, the few weeks that you and I have, you have really large archives.
Yep.
And although there is not as much money in the selling of stock pictures as there used to be, thank you, Getty. Thank you, Internet. But there is, I still make a reasonable amount of money and I still get direct requests. And if you can find it, you can sell it.
Yeah.
It's very important that your work is organized. If you're walking down the street, to me, there's only one rule of being a photographer. You have to have a camera. That's the only rule. I literally will not go beyond the corner of my street without a camera. Just have it. There's always a camera.
Yeah.
And occasionally I'll see a nice picture of the neighborhood and, I will put it into the archives. And I've sold pictures of my neighborhood. Like I said, my front garden was the front page of a newspaper. So that's, one of it, and just keep doing it. And if you're starting out, if you can find someone who will help you out, who will look at your work from time to time, or spend a little money and, pay somebody to go over your work, somebody whose work you like, that's how I did it. I was reading photo credits in magazines long before I ever thought anybody would hire me to shoot for a magazine.
Yeah.
I got real good at opening Time magazine and turning it sideways to read the bylines.
Yeah.
And one of the bylines I would see was, Dennis Rack / Black Star. And it was like, I want whatever Black Star is, I want to be there.
Yeah.
And so just shoot, get together with your friends. Don't think that your work is the be all end all. I have this saying, the day you think you're really good is the day you're probably screwed. Have friends go over your work. I have a very close friend of mine, Steve Liss, who's a long time photographer, but we started out at UPI, and we don't do it anymore. Although he just sent me a video short that he did and wanted my opinion. We would rip each other's work to bits. I know you love that picture. You hung upside down from a helicopter to shoot it, but it's still not very good. It may be good to you personally. Is it good to somebody else? What it makes the work distinctive. And what I might like as work, is not probably what a 22-year-old art director is going to like.
True.
And I look at a lot of publications, and, I'm convinced most of the art directors have seeing eye dogs because I can't believe they put this stuff in a magazine. But if you want to do fashion, study Vanity Fair. Study the fashion and look at the advertising. Look at what people are doing. And then, I hate to say it, this is at the moment probably my personal opinion, but I think the life expectancy of that type of work is going to get a lot shorter.
Yeah.
Because why would you be hiring supermodels? Why would you be doing $50,000 days with the models and everybody and only having the rights for 1 year of advertising when you can do the whole thing with AI and you own it?
Yeah.
And I think that, I think a lot of that work, which is the high-end work, the high-end perfume ads. I had a friend who used to shoot for Vanity Fair, and he literally would say there is no budget. And I recently finished reading Grayton Carter's book, who was the longtime editor. And he talks about no budgets.
Yeah.
Like nobody quite, spend whatever you want to spend.
Yeah.
We used to call Time magazine Land of the Endless Budget, but that was when it was privately owned.
Yeah.
The day it became publicly owned, they take the foosball tables away and cut everybody's salary. And no. So, now if I don't ask for an assistant, and I always assumed you had an assistant.
Yeah.
You're schlepping sets of dynamites and cables, and you don't ask for an assistant, you may not get paid for the assistant.
Yeah.
What you make out of stock photography, read what is the contract with that organization. Who owns the copyright to that work? We know that if you and I go out and shoot a project and we don't give away our copyright, we own it, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the publications who aren't paying much more money than they did a lot of years ago are taking either half the copyright or the whole copyright. If you have a Time magazine cover, they own the copyright, whatever you negotiate at the price. Yeah. I have more experience with Newsweek covers. And I knew back then that if I had a Newsweek cover, that whatever we negotiated the U.S. rights for, if it was run in every edition worldwide, I got paid the same thing. And they could make an ad out of it, which they did, but they had to pay me. Right. So I think it's tougher to make, a living as a photojournalist. It is obviously still very doable. And like any aspect of photography or the arts, it has to be your passion. And,
Cool. And on that note,
places like your wash, I'm sorry.
And on that note, that's a perfect note to move into the thing that I very often do at the end, which is a 6-question quick fire round. Are you ready?
Oh, now I'm in trouble. I don't know.
All right.
This is my coffee. Hold on. Focusing fluid.
Oh, yeah. All right. So, quick fire round.
My friend.
Here you go. All right. Question number 1. What is one item of lighting gear you would never leave home without?
One item of lighting gear. The strobe. A strobe.
Any strobe.
Speed. No, well, if I was going to take one, it'd be a speed light.
Cool. One photographer.
I can make the speed light do anything I want it to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, okay, one photographer, past or present, whose work still inspires you.
Yosef Karsh.
Great answer. What is the biggest mistake photographers make when creating portraits on location?
Lacking imagination. This is a mistake. Not looking around. If you're on their location, how do you tie in what is there with what they do? Because the environment is telling part of the story. Now, I'll tell you, I have one saying, and I tell models this, and sometimes I tell subjects this. I said, look at it like we are making a single frame movie. We're making a movie and we have one frame to tell the whole story. So use your environment.
The most memorable person you've ever photographed?
Oh, I guess a tough one. The most memorable. Anthony Hopkins.
Oh, okay.
Vincent Price. I mean, I have a lot of wonderful people that I've had the honor to photograph.
Yeah.
And virtually everybody I've ever photographed.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed. I mean, there were one or two I didn't enjoy, I mean, photographing, Chuck Berry. Elvis Costello was fantastic to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, and then a whole bunch of scientists and, Bill Clinton. I loved working with Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Bush 41, the senior President Bush. He was great to work with.
Yeah.
So, and I won't tell you who was horrible to work with. In my entire long career, there's one person who was horrible to work with.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
You can tell me after we stop recording.
Sure.
All right. Film or digital, and why?
Oh. I'll tell you, my favorite period as a magazine photographer was when we shot slide film. Because your job was to go out, know where to be, figure out how to be there, figure out how to make the picture. One of my editors at Time would say to me, don't go do what the wire guys are doing. I'm going to see their picture anyway. Go try something else. And you went and you did your part of the job. And at the end of the shoot, you took all those rolls of film and you took them out of your pocket and you took an envelope and you wrote, name, Friedman, process, normal, Clinton in Iowa, end of caption, throw it in an envelope and go with the other magazine photographers, go out to dinner to a pub. And while the writers were writing, we were drinking, and some guy showed up and pick up your phone. And you either did it or you didn't do it. There was no, I'll save it later. You didn't look at anything,
Yeah.
And I think it forced you to be a better photographer. I mean, the best we could do on an elaborate lighting situation was I had a Polaroid 195 to do my tests, which weren't all that accurate. So I really liked that period. That said, when I shifted from film to digital, which I literally did in one weekend, I had an assignment that came in. It was a 7-day assignment. The last photograph of the 7 days had to be transmitted, and I didn't know how to do it.
Right.
And I used to say I wasn't going to switch until it made a difference, and that was the day it made a difference. So yes, I mean, I love shooting digital. I like playing with the pictures. But when we shot film, you were done.
Yeah.
I come back from a job, I'm nowhere near done. I am the editor. I'm the pre-press guy. I mean, I'm doing everything but the layout kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I have the control of, I'm not sending anything I don't like.
Yeah.
You shot film, you sent good, bad, ugly. We used to say that, no news is good news, because the only time you heard from your editor, let me say, is the story's been held. Do you want to stay out for another week? It's like, sure, I'll live in this Marriott for another week. I'm good. And get paid their rates. I can do that. The other times they called was if you had cover, which wasn't that often, or if you screwed up, which fortunately wasn't that often,
Yeah.
So I think that there are pluses to each thing. I do enjoy, having some say over what gets sent. I admit, not that I've ever screwed up an exposure. I do like the ability to correct. So that's sort of the pluses. I mean, if you're doing journalism, you can't use any AI.
Yeah, of course.
Like you can't use a photo if you're doing journalism. There is nothing you are allowed to do. If you took a picture and there's a telephone pole coming out of the guy's head, well, you should have moved because you can't take it out. Right now, if I'm doing corporate work, I can do anything I want.
Exactly.
I have one client who runs a very large business, and she is a delightful woman in her mid-50s who doesn't mind that she loses a couple of pounds. No, I'm not going to make her look like 22-year-old Barbie, but I might smooth out her skin a little bit. I can do that on corporate. I can do that with models. Editorially, don't go there. It's the end of your career, simply put. You're doing weddings, you can do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And weddings are one of the things that's going to survive the AI.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a need for wedding photographers.
Oh, absolutely.
Good wedding photographers make really good money.
Yeah.
May I never shoot another wedding. Just not me. I did it. It was fun. But no, it's just, I suppose if you throw enough money at me, I'll do it.
That's why I always say, I don't shoot weddings only on request.
Yeah. I mean, there's things that I want to do.
Yeah.
If it's something I really want to do, I'll just go do it. Just to do it, because it's something I want to do. And if I make some money out of it, wonderful.
Okay, last question. What is one piece of advice? What is one piece of advice you would give a photographer who wants to make more powerful portraits?
You're going to get back to know more about your subject.
Right.
The more you know about them, the more you can show about them. The more you can get them to relax, because now all of a sudden you've gone from being the enemy with what I call the big black eye, to just somebody they can chat with. And now they're relaxed to being them, and you can pull more out of them. And again, use your environment. I mean, the reason I went all the way to Pennsylvania to do this man's portrait was because I wanted him in his environment. And I got, way more than I anticipated. I mean, it's just, when I said to him, he asked me if I'd mind doing a picture of his dog. Of course I will. I'm happy to do that. And then I asked him, I said, can I just do a picture of you and your wife? So you have it. When was the last time you two had your portrait taken together? And the pictures are just lovely. Of this couple who have been together for many, many, many years, and just the look of the two of them together, completely forgetting I was there.
Yeah.
And then getting him in his backyard and in his garden and, tell me about the shed. Oh, I built that shed. How did you build a shed? And now he's telling me about his passions. And then we go into his library and he's showing me some of his books. And then I said, which book is your favorite that you didn't write? Because he probably had 20 books he wrote. And then he's telling about, but he's forgotten about what we were doing.
Yeah.
And now I'm getting him. I'm capturing him. And it was just delightful. And I think that is the approach. Whether you're, doing rock and roll, if you can be with the people, not when they're not on stage and get a feeling for what they're like and just interact with them, I mean, I have a couple of friends, did a lot of the early punk scene. And they made great pictures because they were just hanging around, doing what everybody else was doing. So, and then just the more you know, the more you can interact, the more you get you get the person. And sometimes, public figures will only want to give you something.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's what everybody's expecting. But if you can do the extra effort, I mean, when I photographed Anthony Hopkins, which was an assignment for People magazine, so, pretty good in, all the negotiations been done between his people and Anthony, and the people from the magazine. I had nothing to do with any of the negotiations. I am supposed to meet him in a hotel in Harvard Square at exactly 7:00. And he was great. His entire don'ts list is I can't have anybody on set who's not working. So if I need 5 PAs, I can have 5 PAs, but I can't bring my mother unless she can carry lights. Anyway, so Keiko and I go, and 7:00 comes. So knock on the door. He's standing there by himself. There's like no security, no PR, nobody. Anyway, he comes in, we're chatting. We're supposed to have 5 or 10 minutes. And we had made a point of seeing his first 3 movies the previous couple of days. So I didn't want to ask him about Hannibal or something. I wanted to talk about his early movies. And I said, when you did these, did you sneak into the theater to see how people reacted? He said, I didn't sneak in. Nobody knew where I was. And then he said, when did you see these? And I said, the last 3 days. He said, why? He said, because I was going to get to meet you today.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we had 45 minutes. And he was just charming and just, so a little extra effort on the photographer's part. If you are going to cover a story, you should be doing your research about that story. Now, whether it's a planned event, you want to know everything about what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, what are possible places to make your picture. I mean, in a few weeks, we have the tall ships are going to sail into Boston Harbor, 50 or 60 of them. I'm already working on that. Where am I going to be? Where am I going to put another photographer? My thought for the second photographer, nobody else has come up with it. I know it'll work. I did it I was hired to do a cargo ship coming in, so I know exactly where to go for that. You get tall ship coming in, the skyline in the background. That's the picture.
Yeah.
But, plan your events, I mean, if it's something like, the gay pride parade through the neighborhood, then what is the route? Show up for the start early, because that's where you're going to get the politicians and celebs just standing around with nothing to do. You're going to make pictures right then and there.
Planning and preparation.
Is.
Yeah.
Planning and preparation, and what gear do you bring? You can't, in the middle of a shoot, say, gee, I need another light. I have one in the car. That doesn't work. It's got to be there. I had a model not too long ago where this was unbelievable. I didn't hire the models. I did talk to somebody and said, this is kind of what I would like. And anyway, this young lady showed up in her pajamas, chewing gum. She never made it to the set. I very nicely said, will you do a change of clothes? Yeah. Like I'm sitting at my computer. She's standing over me blowing bubbles. And I said, you have your makeup? And her mother yells, she did her makeup early this morning. She doesn't need to do it. It's like, wow, you don't really understand who said it is. So if I'm the photographer, I'm like the director, it's my set. And I was going to be nice to work with the young lady. The person who put on the event, somebody informed him of this. And he called the young lady and her mother into his office and said, you're done, leave. So they were thrown off the set.
Right.
You know, because they're not free. You got to be professional.
Yeah.
It's why I don't go to work in my pajamas.
That's it. So plan, prepare, and be professional. Rick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Camera Shake podcast this week.
I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you so much for all of your time and including me in this. And I hope your audience enjoys it.
A huge thank you to Rick for joining me and for sharing so much practical insight into portraiture, lighting, working with people, and maintaining creative curiosity across such a long career. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation is that strong portraits do not begin with gear or perfect location. They begin with observation, preparation, connection, and the willingness to solve whatever problem is in front of you. You can find links to Rick's work, workshops, and social media in the description below, of course. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe to the Camera Shake podcast wherever you're listening or watching. And if you are watching on YouTube, give the video a like, leave a comment, and let me know, what is the most difficult location you have ever had to make a portrait in? You can also support the show, of course, through buymeacoffee.com and check out the Camera Shake merchandise store over on camerashakepodcast.com. Links, as always, are in the description. So thank you so much for watching or listening. As always, keep shaking things up in the world of photography, and I'll see you next Thursday.